I stood at the entrance of the Blue Pine Resort, watching my adoptive family's minivan disappear down the winding mountain road. The exclusive vacation spot had been our family's summer tradition for 15 years, except this year was different. This year, Mom had made it crystal clear that family vacation means real family only. What they didn't know was that I now own not just this resort but the entire mountain luxury collection. The deed had been signed last week, making me the proprietor of the very place I'd just been excluded from. At 32, I had built Summit Enterprises into a hospitality empire while maintaining the facade of a modest IT consultant. Every time my adoptive family dismissed my career choices or excluded me from their privileged circle, I channeled that energy into expanding my business ventures. Mr. Davidson. The resort manager, Thomas, approached me discreetly. Everything is prepared according to your specifications. I nodded, straightening my casual designer sweater knot that my family had noticed it wasn't from the department store. Perfect timing. Let's proceed as planned. The past 15 years flashed through my mind watching from the sidelines as my adoptive siblings Mark and Diana enjoyed premium services while I was treated like an afterthought. The separate dining arrangements, the forgotten spa reservations, the constant reminders that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion they offered. I'd found my way to the Winters family at age 6, after my biological parents died in an accident. The wealthy Winters saw adoption as the perfect way to boost their social profile. Local business leaders give orphan a home made for excellent PR. What they hadn't counted on was my determination to succeed despite their constant undermining. Your suite is ready, sir, Thomas continued. The presidential villa has been prepared to your preferences. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same suite my adoptive parents had always booked was now mine by right of ownership. Through the lobby windows, I could see the familiar family scene unfolding at the lakefront. Mom and Dad setting up their usual spots, Mark showing off his new golf clubs, Diana organizing her designer shopping schedule. My phone buzzed with a message from my executive assistant: acquisition of neighboring property completed. Mountain Luxury Collection now controls entire valley. The timing was perfect. For months I'd been quietly buying up every property and business in the valley through various shell companies. The resort was just the crown jewel in what would soon become the most exclusive mountain destination in the country. Sir, Thomas looked uncertain. Your family's usual requests have started coming in. Mrs. Winters is asking about their standard dinner reservations and activity schedules. Process everything as normal, I instructed, but implement the new protocol we discussed. The new protocol was simple but effective. Every service, every amenity my family had taken for granted would now require explicit owner approval. I made my way to my suite, remembering all the summers I'd spent in the standard rooms while my siblings enjoyed luxury accommodations. The presidential villa offered a panoramic view of the lake and mountains, a view I'd only glimpsed through windows I'd been told not to approach. James? Diana's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. She stood in the lobby, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. What are you doing here? Mom said you weren't coming this year. Just checking in for a few days, I replied casually. Business meetings in the area. She frowned, perfectly manicured nails tapping against her phone. Well, don't make things awkward. You know how Mom feels about maintaining appropriate boundaries. Appropriate boundaries. That had been the theme of my entire childhood. Don't sit too close at family photos. Don't mention the adoption at social events. Don't expect the same privileges as your real siblings. Of course, I smiled. I wouldn't want to impose on the family vacation. As Diana walked away, I noticed her heading toward the spa miss, where she'd soon learn that her standing appointments had been mysteriously canceled. Small changes had already begun. The family's usual table at the restaurant was now reserved for owners' special guests. Their preferred tea times were under review, and their suite's amenities had been upgraded to new management standards. My phone buzzed again. Local press requesting comment on resort's change in ownership. Several business publications interested in profile pieces. Hold all press inquiries, I replied. Timing is everything. That evening I watched from my balcony as my family encountered the first of many small inconveniences. Their attempts to pull rank with the staff met with polite but firm explanations about new ownership policies. Mom's demands to speak with management were met with professional deflection. This is outrageous, I heard her declare at the restaurant. We've been coming here for 15 years. Don't you know who we are? The matron's response was perfect. Of course, Mrs. Winters. However, the new owner has implemented strict protocols regarding special treatment. Perhaps you'd like to request a meeting with ownership to discuss your concerns? I smiled, sipping my perfectly aged whiskey. The meeting would come, but not yet. First, let them experience what it felt like to be treated as ordinary guests, or better yet, as family members who didn't quite belong. The next morning, I reviewed the day's schedule on my laptop. My family had 7 different complaints logged with guest services, all related to their suddenly reduced privileges. Dad had already demanded to speak with the owner 3 times. Mr. Davidson Thomas appeared at my door. Your family is rather insistent about meeting the new owner. They're threatening to take their business elsewhere. Let them threaten, I replied calmly. But make sure they know that all local luxury properties are now under the same management. As I walked through the resort that day, I observed my family's mounting frustration. Mark's golf game was scheduled for the common tea times. Diana's spa treatments were only available at standard guest hours. Mom's request for private beach access was politely declined. This place has gone downhill, Dad announced loudly in the lobby. We need to speak with whoever's responsible for these changes. I continued past them, unseen as usual. They had never paid attention to my comings and goings before. Why start now? But soon, very soon, they would have no choice but to notice. My phone lit up with another message. Final paperwork completed. All resort staff updated on new ownership protocols. The pieces were falling into place. Tonight, at the resort's weekly family night dinner, an event my family had always dominated, everything would change. I dressed carefully in a bespoke suit that cost more than their monthly country club dues. The restaurant had been prepared according to my specifications. The best table, usually reserved for my family, was set for 1. Right on schedule, I heard Mom's voice rise in protest. What do you mean our table isn't available? We always sit there. I apologize, Mrs. Winters. The maitre d' replied smoothly. That table is reserved for the owner this evening. The owner? Dad's voice carried across the restaurant. Perfect, we've been trying to meet with them. Where are they? I stood up slowly, buttoning my jacket as I turned to face them. The recognition took a moment. They were so used to looking past me that it took time to process my presence. Good evening, I said calmly. I believe you wanted to meet the new owner. The silence that followed was absolute. Mom's face went pale. Dad's mouth opened and closed without sound, and my siblings stared as if seeing a stranger. That's impossible, Mark finally managed. Actually, I smiled. It's good business. Please join me. We have a lot to discuss about the future of family vacations. The look on my family's faces as they sat at my table was worth every million I'd spent acquiring the resort. Mom's perfectly maintained composure cracked. Dad's business facade crumbled, and my siblings seemed to shrink in their designer clothes. Wine? I offered, gesturing to the $2,000 bottle of Bordeaux breathing on the table. It's from the owner's private collection, which I suppose makes it my private collection now. How? Dad's voice was barely a whisper. The Mountain Luxury Collection wasn't even for sale. I took a measured sip of wine before responding. Everything's for sale if you know the right price and the right people. Your country club connections aren't the only networks that matter in business. But you're just an IT consultant. Diana blurted out, her world visibly realigning. Living in that modest apartment is the penthouse of a building I own. I corrected her. Summit Enterprises owns 37 properties across 3 states. This resort is just the latest acquisition. The waiter appeared with our appetizers, or rather, my appetizer. My family hadn't actually been seated with proper place settings, a detail they were just beginning to notice. I can have settings brought for you, I offered, enjoying their discomfort. Though I believe Mom's exact words were family vacation means real family only. I wouldn't want to impose. Mom's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. James, sweetheart, you must understand, we only wanted to protect your perfect family image. I finished for her. To keep the adopted child in his proper place. Don't worry, I understood perfectly. Every summer for 15 years. I pulled out my phone, showing them the resort's booking system. You know what's interesting? I can see every note you've ever had added to your reservation files. Ensure J. Davidson receives standard room only. Maintain separate dining arrangements for auxiliary family member. My personal favorite, space services reserved for primary family members. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Those were just organizational choices. They were deliberate exclusions. I corrected him. But enlightening ones. They taught me exactly how privilege works. And how to acquire it for myself. A notification popped up on my phone. The local business journal had caught wind of the ownership change. Soon everyone in their social circle would know. The press will be announcing the change in ownership tomorrow. I informed them. I imagine your social circle will have quite a few questions about the family dynamics at play. You can't do this to us, Diana protested. Our friends, our connections. We'll all learn that the adopted child you tried so hard to minimize now owns your favorite summer retreat. I smiled. Consider it a lesson in irony. Dad leaned forward, his business negotiation face on. Name your price. Whatever you paid for the resort, I'll match it. You can't afford to match it, I replied simply. Your entire net worth wouldn't cover half of what Summit Enterprises is worth. But this isn't about money. It's about something you never understood. Respect, I gestured around the restaurant. Every server you've dismissed, every housekeeper you've ignored, every staff member you've treated as beneath you. They all work for me now. And they've been instructed to provide exactly the level of service you've shown you deserve. Which means what exactly? Mom asked, her voice tight. It means you'll be treated like regular guests. No special privileges, no exclusive access, no preferential treatment. Just like you've treated me for 15 years. I took another sip of wine, though I might be persuaded to make some exceptions. What do you want? Mark asked. A public apology, I said. Not just to me, but to every adopted child you've made feel less than worthy. A significant donation to adoption support services. And a complete restructuring of the family's approach to what constitutes real family. The silence that followed was deafening. They were finally beginning to understand the full scope of their new reality. And if we refuse? Dad challenged. Then you'll find that every luxury resort within 500 miles is suddenly fully booked whenever you try to make a reservation. Amazing how ownership networks work. I stood up, straightening my jacket. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. I'll be in the presidential villa. Your old suite, I believe. As I turned to leave, Mom called out, James, wait, we're still your family. I paused, looking back at them. No, you're people who took me in for good publicity, and spent 26 years reminding me I should be grateful for scraps of inclusion. Family is something else entirely. Something I had to learn without your help. Back in my suite, I reviewed the press release scheduled for tomorrow. The story would be everywhere. Self-made millionaire returns to childhood vacation spot as owner. The subtitle was particularly satisfying. Adopted son transforms family's exclusive resort into model of inclusive luxury. My phone buzzed with messages from my siblings, ranging from angry to pleading. I ignored them all. They needed to understand that their actions had consequences. That the power dynamic had shifted permanently. Looking out over the moonlit lake, I remembered all the summers I'd watched from a distance as they enjoyed their exclusive family activities. Now, standing in the same spot where they'd once told me to keep my distance from their photos, I felt not triumph, but a kind of peace. Tomorrow they would either adapt to the new reality, or face the consequences of their choices. Either way, I had finally claimed my place. Not as their charity case, but as someone who had built his own legacy despite their best efforts to minimize him. The resort's lights twinkled below, each one representing a small part of my growing empire. An empire built not on inherited privilege, but on understanding what it meant to be treated as an outsider, and vowing to change that narrative. A final message came through from Dad. We need to talk. Family breakfast tomorrow. I replied with a single line. Breakfast is served in the main dining room. Regular guest seating only. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the main dining room as I watched my family attempt to process their new reality. They sat at a standard table, not their usual private alcove, looking distinctly uncomfortable as regular guests dined around them. "The press release goes live in 1 hour," I said, checking my watch. "Your social circle will be having their morning coffee when the news breaks." Mom's hand shook as she set down her teacup. "We've discussed your demands. The public apology, the donation." And I maintained my composure, years of business negotiations having taught me the power of silence. "We'll do it," Dad said, his voice carrying none of its usual authority. "But we need to handle this carefully. Our reputation," "Your reputation," I interrupted, "is exactly what got us here. Your carefully crafted image of the perfect family, generous enough to take in an orphan, while behind closed doors you made sure I never forgot my place." Diana leaned forward. "We weren't all bad to you, James. Remember when I invited you to my graduation party? You invited me to serve drinks." I corrected her. "Because it would look bad if the adopted brother wasn't there in some capacity." The truth hit hard. I could see it in their faces. Perhaps for the first time they were seeing their actions through unclouded eyes. "The press release includes interviews with resort staff," I continued. 15 years of observations about how differently you treated me. Every separate table, every excluded activity, every time you made sure other guests knew I wasn't real family." Mark paled. "You can't actually." "I can. But I'm offering you a chance to get ahead of the story." I pulled out my tablet, showing them the drafted statement I'd prepared. "A public acknowledgement of past mistakes. A commitment to change. And a substantial donation to support adopted children who face similar discrimination." The statement was comprehensive but fair. It detailed their pattern of behavior without being vindictive, focused on growth rather than punishment. The proposed donation, $10 million to establish a foundation supporting adopted children's education and integration, would make headlines. $10 million, Dad's voice rose. "That's less than what you spent on Diana's wedding last year." I finished. "Consider it an investment in salvaging your reputation." Mom dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed napkin. "We never meant to hurt you, James. We didn't know how to integrate you properly." "You never tried," I replied quietly. "But this isn't about hurting me anymore. It's about making sure no other adopted child feels like an outsider in their own family." The breakfast crowd had thinned, leaving us in relative privacy. Through the windows I could see the resort staff going about their duties. Staff who had watched for years as I was treated differently, who had secretly slipped me extras when my family wasn't looking. "The foundation," I continued, "will focus on family integration counseling, educational support, and professional networking for adopted individuals. You can be part of that positive change. Or you can be the cautionary tale we use in our seminars." Diana's social media influencer instincts kicked in. We could actually make this work for everyone. A story about growth. About learning. "Exactly." I nodded. "The press loves redemption stories. Wealthy family acknowledges past mistakes, commits to adoption support reads better than family exposed for years of discrimination." The choice was clear, and they knew it. Years of carefully maintained social status hung in the balance. "What about the resort?" Mark asked. "Will we still be able to come here?" "That depends on you," I replied. "Show me you're serious about change, and you'll be welcomed as regular guests. Continue the old patterns and you'll find your membership privileges permanently revoked." Dad straightened his shoulders, his business sense finally engaging. "The foundation. We could make it a joint venture. Show real commitment to change." "Now you're thinking like a businessman." I allowed myself a small smile. "The foundation will be independent, but yes, your active involvement would demonstrate sincerity." The next hour passed in detailed discussion of the announcement, the foundation's structure, and the changes needed in family dynamics. As the clock struck 9, my phone buzzed. The press release was live. "It's done," I announced, standing. "Your social circle is reading it now. I suggest you start making calls before they start calling you." As if on cue, Mom's phone began ringing. The country club president's name flashed on her screen. "One more thing," I added as they prepared to face their new reality. The resort is hosting a benefit next month for adopted children and their families. I expect you all to attend not as honored guests, but as people learning to do better. They nodded, understanding the significance. The power dynamic had shifted permanently, but perhaps something better could emerge from the ashes of their privilege. Later that evening, watching from my balcony as my family packed their cars to leave, I felt no triumph, only hope that real change was possible. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "We have a lot to learn. Thank you for giving us the chance." The resort's lights came on as dusk fell, illuminating the path they'd drive home on. The same path I'd watched them take every summer, leaving me behind. But this time was different. This time, they left understanding that family isn't about blood or adoption papers. It's about choice, respect, and the willingness to grow. 1 year later, I stood at the resort's entrance, watching families arrive for the second annual Adoption Awareness Benefit. The event had grown beyond our expectations, with hundreds of adoptive families gathering to share experiences, learn from each other, and celebrate their diverse journeys. The resort had transformed too. Where once there had been subtle hierarchies and whispered distinctions, now there was an atmosphere of genuine inclusion. Every staff member had been trained in sensitivity and awareness, and the guest feedback had never been better. "Your family just arrived," Thomas informed me, now serving as the resort's general manager after his exemplary handling of last year's changes. I watched as their cars pulled up, not to the VIP entrance they'd once insisted on using, but to the main lobby like every other guest. The change in their demeanor was noticeable immediately. Mom stepped out first, wearing the foundation's logo pinned prominently on her jacket. Over the past year, she'd thrown herself into the work, using her social connections to raise awareness and support for adopted children. The $10 million donation had grown to $30 million through her fundraising efforts. Dad had transformed too, implementing workplace programs for adopted individuals across his business networks. Mark and Diana had become vocal advocates on social media, sharing their journey of understanding and growth. "Welcome to the Blue Pine Resort," I greeted them formally, but with a genuine smile. "James." Mom stepped forward, then hesitated. Over the past year, we'd built a cautious new relationship, one based on earned respect rather than obligation. "The foundation's presentation is at 2, I said, maintaining professional distance, but without the coldness of the previous year. "You're scheduled to speak about your experience." "Yes," Dad replied, his voice carrying a humility that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "About how privilege blinds us, and what it takes to really see." Inside, the resort buzzed with activity. Adoptive families of all backgrounds mingled freely, sharing stories and support. The hierarchies that had once defined this place were gone, replaced by a genuine sense of community. My phone buzzed. In message from the foundation's director, registration numbers exceeded target by 300%. Success stories coming in from across the country. Looking around the lobby, I saw what real family could look like. Not the artificial perfection my adoptive family had once insisted upon, but the messy, beautiful reality of people choosing to love and support each other. "You've created something remarkable here," Diana said softly, watching a group of adopted teenagers excitedly planning their activities. "We all did," I corrected her. "Once we chose to." The day flowed with presentations, workshops, and meaningful connections. When Dad took the stage to speak, his words carried the weight of hard-earned wisdom. "We thought we were giving someone a better life, but we forgot to give them our hearts. Today we're learning what family really means." As evening fell, we gathered for dinner, not at separate tables or in private rooms, but in the main dining room among all the other families. The conversation was different now, focused on foundation projects and future plans rather than social status and appearances. "Next year," Mom said carefully, "we'd like to host some foundation events at our home. If you think that would be appropriate." I considered her offer, remembering all the family events I'd been excluded from in that house. But this wasn't about the past anymore. "I think that would be perfect," I replied. New memories in old places. Later, standing on my balcony, watching the sunset, I reflected on how much had changed in a year. The resort had become more than just a luxury destination. It was a symbol of transformation, a place where families of all kinds could feel truly welcome. My phone lit up with one last message for the day. A photo from the hospital where I'd been left, as a baby. They'd just opened a new adoption support center, funded by our foundation. The caption read, "Every child deserves not just a better life, but a true family." Looking down at my family, mingling with other guests by the fire pit, I smiled. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most important truths. And sometimes, coming home means creating a new definition of what home can be. Mr. Davidson, Thomas appeared at my door. "Tomorrow's reservations are ready for your review. Just one thing," I said, scanning the list. "Make sure every family gets the same welcome." Because in the end, that's what this was all about. Not revenge or power, but creating a place where no child would ever feel less than family. The end.